February 25th, 2015. It's a chilly Wednesday afternoon in Houston, Texas, America's fourth largest city.
Houston is a huge city. It keeps growing. People seem to flock here.
We have our host of different communities, and you can really find your place here.
But each year, most of these communities are touched by tragedy.
It's not like other cities where you don't hear about a murder for a month. We have hundreds a year.
And today, another name is about to be added to the city's list of victims.
Exterminator, anybody home?
An exterminator was spraying for bugs at a West Houston apartment complex.
Exterminator coming in.
As soon as he enters, he realizes there's someone in the apartment.
Ma'am? Ma'am, are you okay?
There was a young woman lying face down on the floor of the apartment.
He thought, well, maybe she's sick, and then he saw the blood.
The exterminator rushes to get the building manager. And when she arrives, she immediately calls 911.
615 medical. What is your emergency?
I have one of the residents in this apartment. She doesn't seem that she is actually breathing.
Is she moving out at all?
No, she's not moving at all.
The resident is identified as Ebony Harris.
We have units in marked to that location.
28-year-old Ebony Harris had a magnetic personality.
Ebony was just, she loved music, she loved to sing, she was fire. And her humor was the best thing about it because she could laugh at the worst of times and make everything better.
But her resilience was tested by the hardships she faced growing up.
Ebony became a mother when she was just 17. And her relationship with the father didn't last long after the arrival of their baby.
She was growing up, but her partner was not.
The couple split up, but Ebony wasn't going to let that keep her from providing for her son.
When things got rough, she'd fight her way through it. She knew failure was not an option.
She was able to work in a shipping company and was providing for her family.
And soon, she had a second chance at romance.
She met a young man named Tavon, and they fell in love. And soon, they were living together.
He really provided that feeling of stability that Ebony was looking for.
When Ebony and Tavon had a son of their own, it looked like her vision of a perfect family had become reality.
It was a good time in her life. Another son to join her family. A good father looking after both her children and taking care of her.
But sadly, this relationship also didn't last.
In the long run, they didn't work and they broke up.
It was not a good season in her life. She needed to find shelter.
And for Ebony, the shelter she needed was with her family.
Her mother had moved up north and she remained here in Houston, but she had aunts and uncles and cousins. She was very close with.
She also remained close with her mom, even with the distance.
Hey, Mom.
Ebony and I had a really, really close relationship. I was living here in Virginia, but told her, you know, I always got you. I'll always be there for you.
Ebony was able to turn to her mom for support.
Ebony and I had came up with a plan for her to move to Virginia, and we were gonna start a home daycare.
With her family behind her, Ebony was determined to keep moving forward.
She was just starting to get some momentum in her life.
But now, Ebony's been found unresponsive and bleeding on the floor of her apartment.
If anyone willing to do CPR, I can give you instructions.
But it's too late for CPR.
She looks already kind of like purple.
When first responders arrived, they could see that she was face down and that she appeared to have stab wounds.
There was no way they could save her, and it was clear to them that she had been dead for a while.
Dispatch, I need homicide and CSI to this location.
While they wait for homicide detectives, police turn to the property manager for information on the victim.
The manager said that there were never any complaints about her from other tenants, but she really didn't know Ebony personally.
She has 2 little kids, 2 boys.
Where are they now?
I don't know.
Her sons weren't in the apartment.
Was this a kidnapping or something worse?
Where are these kids?
After her latest relationship ended, 28-year-old Houston native Ebony Harris was focused on raising her 2 sons.
It's hard being a single mom, but she worked really hard to provide for them and give them a good life.
You okay?
But now she's been found stabbed to death in her apartment, and her 2 young sons are nowhere to be found.
Where are they now?
I don't know.
They didn't know if they were with family members, if they wandered out of the apartment, or if they've been abducted by the killer.
While police launch a search for the missing children, homicide detectives arrive and start by examining Ebony's body.
Ebony's own body really is the blueprint of the story that took place.
In addition to 15 stab wounds, there are bruises around her throat and on her head.
You have strangulation, you have blunt force trauma, and you have stab wounds. 3 of the most violent personal ways to kill somebody.
It's obvious to detectives that the fatal attack had been brutal and prolonged.
You could see that just from the wound pattern on her.
She had defensive wounds where it appeared that she had put her hands up to protect herself.
After her body is transported to the medical examiner's office, detectives begin examining Ebony's apartment.
Whoever did this was probably let in by Ebony because there was no signs of forced entry at all.
Whoever was inside that apartment, Ebony knew.
After finishing up inside, detectives canvass Ebony's neighbors, hoping that someone saw or heard something out of the ordinary.
You said you've been home all day. Is that correct? Did you hear anything suspicious today? Any loud noises? Anything from your upstairs neighbors or anything like that?
No, sir.
They just know Ebony as a good neighbor.
Ebony pretty much kept to herself. She wasn't somebody that, would think was involved in anything nefarious.
But as detectives finish talking to the neighbor, someone very close to Ebony arrives at the scene.
Excuse me. What's going on?
A woman came up to the police and said that she was Katrina Sharp, and she was Ebony's cousin.
She lived nearby, and she saw all the police cars near Ebony's apartment and went to check on her.
Katrina is horrified when she learns what's happened to Ebony. But when she pulls herself together, she gives detectives their first lead.
This has to be her baby's daddy.
Ebony was involved in a custody battle.
His name is Tavon Lawson.
And that's the children's father?
Just the youngest boy.
Like most custody battles, there was issues.
It got pretty ugly.
What do you mean?
She says tensions flared when Ebony sent her sons to stay with their grandmother in Virginia.
She said, Mom, my babysitters keep letting me down, and my job already told me if I missed any more work, I was going to be terminated.
Being a single parent, she doesn't have someone to fill in the gaps.
I said, just send the kids back with me. And she sent both of the boys home with me, back to Virginia.
When Tavon found out, he was furious.
Tavon filed custody papers, and the court ordered Ebony to bring his son back to Houston.
Despite the custody resolution, the situation between them was still tense.
Ebony's ex was causing trouble. They've been having arguments.
Is that where the boy is now, with his father?
No, he's probably with Ebony's sister. She babysits for her.
And the older boy, he's still in Virginia?
Yeah.
With their first solid lead, detectives return to the homicide unit. and contact Ebony's sister.
The reason I wanted to talk to you today is because you were babysitting her child. Is that correct?
Yes. Pretty much every day when she go to work.
Okay. And when did she drop him off?
She dropped him off Monday.
She told police she had been babysitting Ebony's youngest son, but Ebony failed to pick him up after work on Tuesday.
Her sister had kept him an extra night, and when she had to go to work that morning, she left the boy with her and Ebony's father.
After establishing that both of Ebony's sons are safe, detectives start looking at Tavon Lawson.
Given the custody battle, everybody can see why he's high-ranking on the list.
But when investigators try to get him for an interview, he's MIA.
Detectives couldn't reach Tavon, but they left messages that they wanted to talk to him.
They then subpoenaed Ebony's phone records so they could look at the recent contacts she had with them.
Before the records can be provided, detectives hear from Tavon, but not the way they expected.
Really? I'll be right down. Who is it? Tavon Lawson.
Tavon has come in to see the police, but not because they asked to talk to him.
Tavon's animated, and his voice is loud.
I want to see my son now.
Tavon Lawson, the prime suspect in the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Ebony Harris, has just arrived at the Houston Homicide Unit.
I want to see my son now.
It was interesting to the detectives because the only possible motive that they found for Ebony's murder so far was the custody problems she'd been having with Tavon over their son.
But is Tavon a suspect? Or just a concerned father?
I want to see my son now.
Calm down. Your son is safe. He is with Ebony's dad.
Once the detectives calmed Tavon down, he was very cooperative.
He wasn't happy, but he understood that he wouldn't be reunited with his son until he was cleared as a suspect.
So he sits down with detectives for an interview.
Tell me about your relationship with Ebony.
She got pregnant with my son. We had moved together. Things didn't work out, so we went our separate ways.
Ebony and her ex were, for the most part, congenial after they broke up and how they managed the child.
But that changed when Ebony sent her sons to Virginia to stay with her mother.
Moving the children created a lot of conflict between them.
He was furious that Ebony would make such an important decision without telling him.
But once the son was back in Houston and they had shared custody, his relationship with Ebony had improved somewhat.
Despite his battles with Ebony, this was the mother of his child, and he respected that.
Whoever done this, man, need to be caught for the sake of my son. He loved his mom. I don't really know how I'm going to explain this to him.
He wanted to be as cooperative as he could as a concerned father.
And there could be an easy way to strike him from the suspect list.
The police asked him for a DNA swab, and he willingly gives it.
And if it comes back saying, hey, you were there, I got to come back and be like, hey, man, what's up?
You know what? I'm not even worried about that. I got to be at work at 6:30.
You've been at work the entire day from 6:30 in the morning.
Right.
They can
confirm that.
Their best lead, a likely dead end. Detectives ask Tavon if he knows of anyone who wanted to harm Ebony.
It was a guy at her job that she mentioned having problems with.
Who's this guy?
I don't know the name.
After the interview, investigators contact Tavon's supervisor at work.
Yeah, this is the Houston PD.
It turns out he has a pretty solid alibi. He was at work all day.
All right, thanks.
Tavon Lawson is in the clear. But when detectives call Ebony's mother, Patricia Buffalo, she isn't convinced.
Ebony's mother is thinking this is the guy who killed my daughter.
I've never seen anybody be so cold-hearted in my entire life.
But when the detective asks if there's anyone else who might harm her daughter, she does give them another name.
Ebony's mom was able to tell the detectives there's this man named Cedric.
Cedric was apparently dating her daughter, and they had broken up not too long before.
I warned Ebony, I said, look, leave that guy alone. And she did. But I remember her telling me probably about 2 weeks ago that he contacted her.
She didn't know his last name. She didn't know how to get in touch with him. All she knew was that this was another person in Ebony's life.
Patricia says she thinks they met at Ebony's job.
But when detectives contacted the shipping company that Ebony works, it turned out to be another dead end.
So nobody named Cedric works there. All right, thanks.
When Ebony's phone records finally come in a few days later, investigators hope they can lead them to Cedric.
When the records were released, they showed that Ebony's last call was an hour-long conversation with her mother at 10:30 a.m. on February 24th.
In the hours prior to that last call, there's a flurry of activity on her phone.
There were a number of calls and texts to a number listed in her phone as Cedric. But that wasn't the only person Ebony was in contact with that morning.
They also find another name on Ebony's phone records, someone named Bay.
All kinds of text messages going back and forth.
After the likely time of Ebony's death, all incoming communication from Bay ceases.
There were a couple of messages from Cedric after that, and tons of activity from Ebony's family and friends, but nothing at all from Bay.
Now detectives are left wondering, could Bay be Ebony's killer?
This person, whoever Bay is a part of Ebony's life.
Did he go silent because he knew she was dead?
So who is Bay?
Hey, babe.
For Houston detectives investigating the murder of 28-year-old single mother Ebony Harris, the list of possible suspects is growing.
Ebony's phone records show that she was communicating with two different men immediately before she was murdered. One listed in the phone as Cedric and the other as Bay.
Detectives first called the number connected to Cedric, the man Ebony had recently ended things with.
Detectives learned that his full name was Cedric Jacobs. When they told him they were calling about Ebony Harris, he seemed to have no idea what had happened to her.
The detectives break the news to him about Ebony. He's shocked.
And he agrees to come in for an interview.
He tells him that his relationship with Ebony was like a friends with benefits kind of thing.
I do have a girlfriend already, so I was just kind of dealing with her on the side.
Cedric claimed that he and Ebony only hooked up a handful of times around Christmas and New Year's.
But his story changes when detectives tell him they'd heard he and Ebony were going through a bad breakup.
Cedric kind of backtracked and did admit that he and Ebony had a falling out, but he said they reconnected around Valentine's Day.
According to Cedric, they went out to a bar, and Ebony fainted.
She got sick, and she fainted, so I carried her out.
But when he took her home, she dropped a bombshell.
She revealed to him that she was pregnant with twins.
After she told me that, I started questioning her about it, like, well, do you think I'm the father? What's the scenario here?
She's like, no.
She didn't say who the father was, though she did give a clue to his identity.
She was telling me that she might be pregnant by a guy in Virginia.
Is Cedric just trying to deflect attention from himself? Or is the man from Virginia the Bay in Ebony's phone?
Ebony's mother lived in Virginia, and Ebony would often go back to visit her, but her mother hadn't mentioned anyone she was seeing there.
With nothing else to hold Cedric on, The detectives only have one more question.
Will you consent to a buccal swab for DNA?
Yeah, definitely.
After collecting his DNA, the autopsy report confirms that at least part of Cedric's story is true.
The autopsy revealed that Ebony was almost 6 weeks pregnant with twins when she was stabbed to death. The medical examiner took a DNA sample from the unborn children to compare with DNA samples from Tavon Lawson and Cedric Jacobs.
While waiting for the results, investigators focused their attention on identifying the man listed as Bay in Ebony's phone.
When they started speaking to Ebony's friends, this idea kept coming up that she was kind of smitten with a guy that's in the Navy.
And the number listed for Bay has a Norfolk, Virginia area code.
The Norfolk area is home to several major U.S. naval installations.
So detectives call Ebony's mother, Patricia Buffalo, again.
The detectives ask Ebony's mom, do you know of anybody that Ebony's been in touch with there in Virginia?
Patricia immediately gives them a name. Marcus Murphy.
Marcus Murphy is the neighbor of Patricia Buffalo's that's in the Navy.
But she can't understand why they're asking about him.
I said, that's my godson. This is somebody that I revered like one of my own children.
Marcus actually lived in the same apartment complex as Ebony's mom. Ebony would go to Virginia to see her mom, and it was on one of those visits where her mom introduced Ebony to Marcus.
Hey, Marcus, how are you doing?
Good.
I'm glad you're here. I'd like to introduce you to Ebony, my daughter.
Hi, it's nice to meet you.
Ebony and Marcus were close friends, but her mother insists that's all they were.
Marcus had a very serious girlfriend, and he had children with her. So I don't think that Miss Buffalo saw him as a romantic match for her daughter.
Oh, yes. Him and his girlfriends are always helping me out. They are really good about that.
It's nice to hear that.
We're always happy to help.
Miss Buffalo could not believe that he could be involved in this in any way.
But alarm bells go off when, as Patricia gives them the number she has for Marcus, it's a match for Bay's contact in Ebony's phone.
Now that they had identified Bay as Marcus, detectives flew to Norfolk, Virginia to try to talk to him and his commanding officer.
At the naval base, his commander tells the detectives that Marcus is temporarily on duty in Pensacola, Florida. But he can't imagine he'd be involved.
He had been in the Navy for several years. He was doing well.
He was making rank. It wasn't a paycheck for him. He actually enjoyed being in the Navy.
But the detectives are more interested in Marcus's character than his service record.
Is he manipulative? Did he have anger or any control issues?
Not that I ever saw. He never showed like overly aggressive behavior toward anyone else.
And nothing from his background check raised any red flags for commanders when Marcus had first joined the force either.
The expectation is that military folk could be a pillar of the community.
Detectives ask if there's any way Marcus could have been off the base for several days without anyone knowing.
His commanding officer informed them that they kept track of all their personnel. He even offered to show detectives their records.
This is our muster sheet. This tells us who is where on what days.
The detectives ask what the muster sheet shows on February 24th, the day Ebony was murdered.
On this day, Officer Murphy was on liberty.
Marcus was off duty from the 24th to the 26th.
That instantly makes him suspect number one.
Houston detectives investigating the murder of Ebony Harris have just learned that a Navy officer from Virginia that she'd secretly dated was on leave the same weekend that she was killed.
The investigators were faced with the possibility that Marcus Murphy had used his 3-day leave to fly to Houston and kill Ebony.
The next step for the detectives is to contact Marcus and get his side of the story.
There was one problem, though. Marcus was currently in Florida for training, so they couldn't speak with him face to face.
They returned to Houston and called Marcus to interview him over the phone.
Mr. Murphy?
Yeah.
Okay, hey.
Surprisingly, he readily admits that he did hook up with Ebony on one of her trips to Virginia.
Marcus shared some things about the relationship, but he didn't talk about the pregnancy.
And he says he knows nothing about Ebony's murder.
One thing they asked him was, were you ever in Houston? And he denies ever coming to our city.
Marcus says during his leave, he'd driven to Danville, Virginia to pick up his son from his mother.
He was with your mom?
Yeah.
So you were never in Houston that week?
Never.
Okay, well, that's all I really needed from you.
Marcus couldn't have committed the murder if he was halfway across the country in Virginia.
After talking to Marcus, investigators called his mother, and she confirmed that Marcus had picked the boy up on February 25th.
But is that the only place he went while on leave?
Marcus couldn't have driven to Houston, but he could have flown. So investigators reached out to the airlines to investigate the passenger records for the days around the murder.
It turns out that on February 24th, Marcus Murphy bought a plane ticket taking a flight from Charlotte, North Carolina to Houston.
Not only was he in Houston, he flew to Houston and then back to North Carolina, all in the same day. It's the same day as the murder.
And when investigators subpoena Marcus's phone records, they confirm what the airline manifest showed.
This phone puts him in Houston on the day that Ebony was murdered.
It's enough to get a warrant for Marcus Murphy's arrest.
Marcus was taken into custody in Pensacola, Florida, and held pending extradition to Texas.
Detectives fly from Houston to Florida to question him.
When he first went in the interview, he was open. He was just kind of having a conversation.
He's kind of acting like he doesn't have a care in the world.
So the detectives tell him that they know he flew to Houston the day Ebony was killed.
Now Marcus's story changes.
Yes, I was in Texas.
Marcus confirms he flew there to see Ebony.
He came to Houston so that he could help her out.
He says she told him she was pregnant with twins and struggling financially.
He told the investigators that he was flying here to give her $300.
This is pretty much who I am. I give every dime I have to someone who doesn't. I always have, I always will.
That did not make sense because he spent so much money purchasing flights and coming down here when he could have just wired her the money.
Marcus says that when he arrived at the apartment, Ebony was getting ready to go to work.
She was going to take a shower, and I hadn't ate anything all day.
Marcus said he walked to a nearby restaurant with the understanding that Ebony would meet him there after she got out of the shower, but she never showed up.
And she didn't answer when he tried calling her.
I went back, I knocked on the door, she didn't come to the door, and by this time my phone's alarmed me that it's time for me to go back to the airport.
Marcus says he took a cab to the airport to catch his flight back to Virginia.
When I got to the airport, I think I sent her a couple text messages calling saying, hey, you know, what happened? But I knew she said she had to go to work.
Marcus said he assumed she just left until after he got back to Virginia, and Ebony's mother got the news that she'd been killed.
Marcus says he was shocked, but also worried how his trip to Houston would look.
He tries to play it off that, well, I knew it made me look guilty.
The detectives don't buy his excuses, but they do have one final question.
Would you be willing to take a DNA test?
Sure, see if I'm the father?
Yes.
I would love to, because that was something that was like on my mind.
Waiting for the DNA results from the lab, detectives reach out to Marcus Murphy's girlfriend, Brianna Wright.
We learned that she did not know about this relationship that Marcus had with Ebony.
Brianna is stunned when she learns that police think Marcus could be responsible for Ebony's murder.
She was shocked to find out that Marcus had flown to Houston. So she actually went onto his email account and located the ticket.
I actually found the itinerary that's shown when he flew out, when he got to Houston, when he left Houston.
Wow.
According to the itinerary, Marcus didn't make the trip alone.
It showed that his cousin was also on the flight with him.
Houston detectives are convinced that Marcus Murphy flew from North Carolina to Texas to kill 28-year-old single mother Ebony Harris. And now Marcus's girlfriend, Brianna, has told them that he didn't make the trip alone.
Brianna had looked at Marcus's flight itinerary.
He had his cousin, Ricky, with him. What is his involvement in this? Was he an accomplice?
After talking to Marcus's girlfriend, investigators arranged to interview his cousin in Virginia.
Why do you think we're talking to you?
Because we were in text from that she apparently got murdered.
According to Ricky, Marcus had called him the day before and said that he had 2 non-refundable airline tickets he needed to use.
But he says the only luggage they took was a carry-on bag that Marcus had.
Did you ask him what was in that bag?
The only thing that was in there was a jacket of his. And before we left that night, he bought 2 pairs of gloves.
Ricky says he wasn't really sure where they were going. But he says Marcus told him he wanted to see a woman he knew.
They had a layover in Atlanta, and then when they got to Houston, they took a cab to an apartment complex.
Ricky decides that he's just going to hang out for a little bit till his cousin does his business.
He says he walked to a nearby restaurant and got something to eat.
He comes back and he tells me that we're going to miss our flight and that we need to hurry to leave.
Ricky said that he and Marcus took a cab back to the airport and flew home. He said that Marcus never told him what had happened at the apartment.
It didn't make a lot of sense to us, but we couldn't really disprove it either.
Ultimately, no charges are filed against Marcus's cousin.
The police and the district attorney were focused on assembling evidence against Marcus, not on making the case more complicated.
When DNA results come back from the lab, it's the final nail in the coffin for Marcus Murphy.
DNA found under Ebony's fingernails matched the DNA sample investigators took from Marcus. It proved beyond any doubt that he was the person that she fought with before she was murdered.
But the test results also reveal something surprising.
Another gentleman was, in fact, the father of her twins, and it was not Marcus Murphy.
That was really upsetting because we felt like, man, this was for nothing.
A truly senseless crime, and there will be a long wait for justice.
Ebony's family had to wait 7 years for this case to go to trial.
COVID shut our courthouse down, and we just had to be patient and wait.
In November of 2022, Marcus Murphy finally goes on trial for Ebony's murder.
He was charged with capital murder because he killed Ebony knowing that she was pregnant, so he was held responsible for killing more than one person.
In their opening statement, the prosecution argues that it was Ebony's pregnancy that led to the murder.
Ebony had told Marcus that she was pregnant with twins and that she thought he was the father.
He realized that he was going to have to confess some things to his girlfriend that he did not want to.
He was acting on the fear of what that might mean for his life.
And what his fear made him do was carefully plan a murder.
You see in his search history that he's searching airplane flights, and he bought 2 pairs of gloves that he knew he was going to wear when he murdered this girl.
Then Marcus and his cousin Ricky flew to Houston.
Ricky raided in a nearby restaurant while Marcus went to Ebony's apartment.
She liked this guy, and I think she opened the door willingly.
Hey, babe. You should have told me you were here. I was about to take a shower.
I wanted to surprise you.
Marcus quickly revealed the real surprise.
You want something to eat?
Sure.
She had Marcus's DNA under her right hand fingernails, which indicates to us that she fought him.
She was able to get away, but Marcus grabbed a knife.
We believe the knife was taken from her knife block in the kitchen.
You don't have to stab someone 15 times to kill them. But because of the emotional state he was in, he just kept going.
When Ebony was dead, Marcus left her lying in her blood.
Marcus cleaned any blood that had gotten on him and left the apartment. Somewhere on his walk back to meet his cousin Ricky, he disposed of the knife. And then they got a taxi back to the airport.
Sitting through the prosecution's case is an emotional ordeal for Ebony's family.
The family saw the brutal autopsy photos. They heard all this graphic testimony.
I did excuse myself out the courtroom a few times.
But through it all, the defense maintains that Marcus didn't kill Ebony Harris.
They argued that Marcus went to her apartment that day but actually never saw her, and then went back to the airport.
The defense's argument was that it was somebody else involved in her life.
And they also attempt to dismiss the DNA evidence.
The defense claimed that there could be DNA from Marcus under Ebony's fingernails because she scratched him the last time they had sex.
We had a DNA expert to testify. Unless she didn't shower from November until February when she was killed, that it would be completely unlikely that his DNA would have remained under her fingernail.
The jury isn't impressed by the defense's arguments.
The jury found Marcus Murphy guilty of capital murder, which in the state of Texas was an automatic sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
The family's long wait is finally over.
I had a lot of joy because my baby finally got some justice.
But nothing can restore what Marcus Murphy took from Ebony's family.
Once you lose someone, you never get over it. It gets a little easier, but you never get over it.
Had Marcus just waited a little while longer, he would have been able to establish that he wasn't the father. A beautiful life was lost because he made the wrong assumptions.
The road that runs through the quiet landscape south of Houston does not look like the setting of one of Texas's most haunting criminal mysteries. Roads stretch between neighborhoods, industrial sites, patches of woodland, open fields, and remnants of the oil industry. But decades ago, in a remote area near Calder Road, investigators began finding the remains of women whose lives had ended in circumstances that remained unexplained for years. The location would eventually become known across America as the Texas Killing Fields. The fields were not one single crime scene, nor is there proof that every murder associated with the broader region was committed by one killer. Instead, the name describes an area along the Interstate 45 corridor between Houston and Galveston where several women and girls disappeared and where human remains were eventually discovered. Among the most closely connected cases are 4 women whose bodies were found near Calder Road between 1984 and 1991. Their names were Heidi Fye, Laura Miller, Audrey Lee Cook, and Donna Gonsolin Prudhomme. To understand why the story became so disturbing, it is necessary to begin before the bodies were discovered, when these women were still living ordinary lives and their families had no reason to imagine that they would one day become part of a decades-long mystery. In October 1983, Heidi Fye disappeared. She was 25 years old and worked in the League City area. On October 7th, she was seen using a public telephone at a convenience store. After that moment, the trail became uncertain. Heidi did not return home, and the people who knew her were suddenly confronted with the frightening reality of a missing person case. Months passed without an answer. Their families were left waiting, while investigators faced a landscape that offered few witnesses, little evidence, and almost no certainty about what happened at first. Then, in April 1984, an unexpected discovery changed the investigation. A dog belonging to a nearby family reportedly brought home a piece of what appeared to be a human skull. Authorities were called, and a search of the surrounding area began. Investigators eventually located human remains in the remote fields near Calder Road. The remains were identified as those of Heidi Fye. For her family, the discovery brought a terrible certainty. Heidi was no longer simply missing. She had died, and her body had been left in an isolated place. Yet the discovery also created a new question that would become central to the entire investigation. Why had her killer chosen this particular area? At the time, the landscape was far less developed than it is today. The region contained isolated roads, undeveloped property, vegetation, and land connected to oil production. Someone could enter the area without attracting much attention. A person could leave a body there and hope that nobody would find it for months or even years. But investigators did not yet know that Heidi's body was only the beginning. On September 10, 1984, 16-year-old Laura Miller disappeared. Laura lived with her family in League City. She was young, familiar with her neighborhood, and had plans for an ordinary evening. Her family did not have a telephone in the house, so Laura was taken to a nearby convenience store so she could make a call to her boyfriend. After making the call, she began walking home. She never arrived. That simple fact became the beginning of another devastating search. At first, the family could not know whether Laura had left voluntarily, encountered an accident, or been taken by someone. As the hours became days and the days became weeks, hope increasingly competed with fear. Laura's disappearance occurred close to the same general area where Heidi Fye had been seen before vanishing. That geographical connection would later become impossible for investigators to ignore. Yet there was still no proof that the two cases were connected. The killer could have been one person, several people, or nobody connected to Heidi's death at all. Laura remained missing for more than a year. Then, in February 1986, teenagers riding off-road vehicles in the Calder Road area made a discovery that transformed the case. They found human remains in the fields. Investigators arrived and began examining the location. The remains were identified as Laura Miller. The discovery was horrifying, but it contained another disturbing surprise. Nearby was the body of another woman. This second unidentified victim became known for years simply as Jane Doe. 3 bodies had now been found in the same general area. Heidi Fye had disappeared in 1983 and was found in 1984. Laura Miller had disappeared in 1984 and was found in 1986. And beside Laura was another woman whose identity nobody could determine. For investigators, the possibility of a pattern became impossible to dismiss. Yet identifying a pattern is not the same as proving a connection. There was no single piece of evidence that immediately revealed a serial killer. The victims were not all the same age, and their backgrounds were not identical. Their disappearances had occurred at different times. The cases also suffered from the limitations of the era. Modern forensic databases did not exist in their current form, and DNA technology was still in its infancy. The unidentified woman became one of the most haunting elements of the investigation. She had a body but no name. She had lived somewhere, known someone, and left behind a history, yet investigators could not tell her family that she was dead because they did not know who she was. Years passed. The 4th discovery came in 1991, when another woman's remains were found in the Calder Road area. Once again, investigators faced the same terrible problem. They had a victim, but they did not immediately know her identity. The woman eventually became known as another unidentified victim, and the cases gave the area its frightening reputation. 4 women had now been found in the same isolated region. The person responsible remained beyond the reach of investigators. Witnesses moved away. Memories faded. Evidence deteriorated. People who might once have remembered a conversation or a vehicle could no longer provide reliable details. Families continued living with questions that had no answers. For decades, the unidentified victims were remembered through temporary names rather than the identities they had carried during their lives. Then technology began to change the investigation. Advances in DNA testing and genetic genealogy offered investigators a new way to approach cold cases. Instead of relying only on fingerprints, photographs, dental records, or old missing person reports, investigators could examine genetic material and search for biological relatives. A person who had remained unidentified for decades could potentially be connected to a family tree. This new approach eventually gave the unidentified women their names back. The woman discovered near Laura Miller was identified as Audrey Lee Cook. Another victim found in the area was identified as Donna Gonsalon Prudhomme. But identification did not answer the most important question. Who killed them? The Calder Road discoveries had created a frightening pattern, but the investigation still had to determine whether the 4 women had been murdered by the same person. Authorities have never established publicly that one individual was responsible for every death associated with the Texas killing fields. Some theories point toward a serial offender. Other possibilities involve multiple unrelated killers who chose the same isolated area because it was convenient for concealing a body. The Texas killing fields therefore began not with a confession, an arrest, or a courtroom, but with absence. One woman disappeared, then another, and even after the victims were finally given back their names, one question continued to haunt Calder Road. If someone was responsible for what happened there, how many times had that person walked into those fields before anyone realized what was happening? The discovery of Laura Miller's remains in 1986 changed the Texas killing fields investigation forever. Until then, investigators had been dealing with separate disappearances and a single recovered body. Now there were multiple victims in the same isolated landscape, and one of them was still unidentified. The question was no longer simply where Laura had gone. Investigators had to ask whether someone had been watching the roads around Calder Road, selecting vulnerable victims, and using the empty fields as a place to hide the evidence. Laura had disappeared on a September afternoon in 1984. She had been 16 years old, and her final known movements seemed ordinary. She had gone to a nearby convenience store to make a telephone call because her family did not have a telephone at home. Afterward, she started walking back toward her house. Somewhere along that short journey, something happened. No reliable witness could explain exactly what. No confirmed account described the moment she disappeared. Her family was left with an incomplete timeline and a terrible silence. For investigators, reconstructing those final minutes became crucial. A person could disappear quickly on a quiet road. A passing driver might notice nothing unusual. A stranger could offer a ride, and a frightened teenager might have little opportunity to react. Every possibility had to be considered, but the absence of direct witnesses made the case extraordinarily difficult. When Laura's body was finally found, investigators could at least begin examining physical evidence. Yet the passage of time had already worked against them. Weather, vegetation, animals, and exposure could destroy or alter evidence. The location itself could conceal important details. A remote field does not preserve a crime scene in the same way a controlled indoor environment does. Every day that passed made the task harder. Then investigators realized that Laura was not alone. The unidentified woman found nearby presented a second mystery. She had been dead long enough that determining who she was not immediately possible. Without a name, investigators could not easily reconstruct her final days. They could not interview her friends, speak with her relatives, trace her movements, or compare her disappearance with known missing person reports. She existed in the case as a body without an identity. That problem was common in American cold cases during the 20th century. Before modern databases and genetic genealogy, investigators depended heavily on fingerprints, dental records, personal possessions, photographs, scars, tattoos, and information supplied by relatives. If none of those methods produced a match, an unidentified victim could remain unknown for decades. The woman near Calder Road became one of those forgotten identities. But the investigation did not stop. Detectives continued looking at missing women and girls from the surrounding region. They examined reports from Houston, League City, Galveston County, and other communities along the Interstate 45 corridor. That corridor was important because it connected large population centers with stretches of less developed land. Thousands of people traveled through the region every day, while certain roads and fields remained isolated. The geography created an uncomfortable possibility. A person could disappear in one community and be transported somewhere else before being killed or abandoned. Alternatively, a victim could have been approached near the fields themselves. Without knowing where each victim had actually encountered her killer, investigators could not determine the offender's method. The later discovery of another victim in 1991 intensified the uncertainty. 4 women were now associated with the Calder Road area. The similarities were obvious enough to attract attention, yet the differences prevented investigators from making a simple conclusion. Were these the victims of one predator who had operated for years? Were several offenders using the same remote location? Or had the apparent pattern been created by geography alone? Families of missing women often found themselves hearing theories that were impossible to prove. Every newly discovered body created hope that an old disappearance might finally be explained, but it also created fear that the list of victims could be much larger. Investigators had to separate coincidence from evidence. Heidi Fai's disappearance became especially important because she was the earliest of the 4 known victims connected to Calder Road. She had been 25 when she disappeared in 1983. Her remains were discovered months later. Her case established the earliest known connection between a missing woman and the fields. Laura Miller was different. She was only 16. Her disappearance had generated intense concern because of her age and because she had vanished while apparently making an ordinary trip home. Her family had expected her to return. Instead, they waited more than a year before learning that she was dead. Audrey Lee Cook remained unidentified for more than 3 decades. During those years, investigators could investigate her death, but could not fully investigate her life. That distinction is important. Solving a homicide often depends on understanding the victim's relationships, habits, employment, conflicts, and recent movements. Without an identity, much of that information disappears behind a wall. Donna Gonsalon Prudhomme faced a similar fate. Her remains were discovered in 1991, but her identity remained unknown for many years. Her family had no certainty that she had died, while investigators had no certainty about who they were seeking. Technology eventually began breaking through that wall. Modern DNA testing allowed investigators to recover and analyze biological evidence that earlier detectives could not use effectively. Genetic genealogy created another possibility. Instead of searching for the exact DNA profile of a victim, investigators could look for relatives who shared portions of the victim's genetic material. From those relationships, genealogists could construct family connections and eventually identify the person. This method transformed the cold case. In 2019, Audrey Lee Cook was finally identified. Donna Gonsalon Prudhomme was also identified. 2 women who had spent decades without names were suddenly connected to families, histories, and lives. The revelations were deeply significant. Audrey was no longer Jane Doe. Donna was no longer an unidentified body. Their identities gave investigators new avenues for examining their final movements and relationships. Yet the most important mystery remained untouched. A name could tell investigators who the victim was. It could not tell them who killed her. The investigation continued to attract attention because the possibility of a connection among the victims remained unresolved. Investigators and journalists examined old statements, previous suspects, local criminals, and people who had lived or worked near the area. Some individuals became the subject of suspicion, but suspicion alone was not enough to establish responsibility. Decades had also created another obstacle. People die, memories disappear, records are lost, buildings are demolished, roads change, areas that were once isolated become surrounded by development. The physical landscape itself becomes a different place. Those unanswered questions kept the investigation alive, even when files grew old and public attention moved elsewhere. For families, every new clue still carried enormous meaning. The Texas killing fields became a symbol of those unanswered questions. The 4 known Calder Road victims represented only part of a much larger mystery surrounding the I-45 corridor. Other women and girls had disappeared in the broader region, and some cases were eventually solved while others remained unresolved. That wider history made the area even more unsettling. Still, Investigators had to resist the temptation to connect every disappearance. A true investigation requires evidence, not atmosphere. Similar geography does not automatically mean the same killer. Similar victims do not automatically mean the same motive. And a frightening pattern is not proof by itself. By the beginning of the 21st century, the Texas killing fields had become one of America's most recognizable cold case stories. But recognition did not mean resolution. The names of the victims were slowly being restored. Their stories were being reconstructed. New forensic techniques were being developed. Old evidence was being reconsidered. And somewhere within those old files might have been the detail investigators had been missing for decades. A name. A vehicle. A witness. A conversation. Or a secret someone had carried since the night Laura Miller disappeared. The fields had kept their silence for years. But as technology improved and investigators returned to evidence that had once seemed useless, the possibility of hearing that silence broken became stronger. The next chapter of the case would move away from the victims' identities and toward the people who had lived around them, the suspects investigators examined, and the disturbing theories that emerged from the shadows of Calder Road. The investigation surrounding the Texas killing fields entered a new and more complicated phase as detectives began looking beyond the empty fields themselves. Finding the victims had answered one question, but it had created another. Someone had placed them there. The person responsible had either known the landscape well, or had discovered that Calder Road offered a convenient place to conceal a body. Investigators therefore began examining the people, vehicles, businesses, roads, and neighborhoods surrounding the area. The first major challenge was that the cases had developed over several years. Heidi Fye disappeared in 1983. Laura Miller disappeared in 1984. Audrey Lee Cook was discovered with Laura in 1986, while Donna Gonsalon Prudhomme was found in 1991. The long interval between discoveries made it difficult to establish a single timeline. If one offender was responsible, that person had apparently remained undetected for years. If several offenders were involved, the apparent pattern became even harder to understand. Detectives examined the circumstances surrounding each woman's disappearance. They wanted to know where she had been last seen, who might have encountered her, whether she had accepted a ride, and whether anyone had noticed an unfamiliar vehicle near the relevant locations. In cold cases, seemingly insignificant details can become important decades later. A vehicle that nobody considered suspicious at the time can become significant when investigators discover that its owner was connected to another victim. The difficulty was that memories change. People who lived near Calder Road in the early 1980s might remember seeing cars or strangers, but decades later their recollections could be incomplete. Some witnesses had moved away. Others had died. Businesses had changed ownership, buildings had disappeared, and roads had been altered by development. The surrounding landscape was changing. The physical environment created an uncomfortable possibility. Calder Road was not simply a random patch of wilderness. It contained secluded stretches where a person could leave the main road and disappear from view. At night, darkness would have made the area even more difficult to observe. During the day, vegetation and uneven terrain could conceal evidence. That did not prove a local resident was responsible. Local knowledge was only one possibility. A stranger could also have discovered the location. Interstate 45 provided a natural connection between Houston and Galveston, bringing a constant flow of traffic through the area. Someone could have entered the region without attracting attention. As the years passed, several names appeared in discussions surrounding the case. Some were people investigators had examined because of their criminal backgrounds, their proximity to the victims, or statements they had made. Others became suspects through theories developed by investigators or members of the public. But the distinction between a suspect and a convicted killer remained essential. Being questioned or investigated did not establish guilt. One figure who attracted attention was Clyde Hedrick. Hedrick had a criminal history and had been convicted in connection with another murder. His name became associated with the broader Texas killing fields investigation, particularly because of questions surrounding possible knowledge of the Calder Road area and the victims. Investigators examined whether he could have information about what happened there. Yet for years, no definitive case connected Hedrick to all 4 Calder Road deaths. The investigation remained circumstantial and incomplete. This was one of the recurring frustrations of the Texas killing fields. Investigators could develop theories, but a theory could not replace evidence capable of surviving in court. Another important complication involved the distinction between the Calder Road victims and the larger group of disappearances along the Interstate 45 corridor. Over the decades, many women and girls disappeared in southeastern Texas. Some were later found alive. Some were found dead. Some cases were solved, while others remained unresolved. Because the region had gained a terrifying reputation, people sometimes assumed that every disappearance must have been connected. Investigators could not make that assumption. A missing person case can have many explanations. A homicide may involve a personal relationship, a robbery, an opportunistic attack, domestic violence, or a stranger predator. Two victims can be found in the same geographical area for completely different reasons. The fact that a body was abandoned in the same general region does not establish that the same person was responsible. This distinction became increasingly important as investigators revisited the evidence using modern forensic methods. DNA could potentially connect a suspect to biological material. Fingerprints could be compared against databases. Missing persons records could be cross-checked. Old photographs could be digitized. Genetic genealogy could reveal family relationships that were impossible to discover when the cases began. The identification of Audrey Lee Cook and Donna Prudhomme demonstrated the power of these advances. For decades, investigators had been unable to give those women their names. Once their identities were established, detectives could reconstruct their lives and investigate their disappearances with a clearer understanding of who they had been. The breakthrough did not immediately reveal the killer, but it changed the nature of the investigation. A victim with a name has a history. A history creates connections. Connections create people who can be interviewed, documents that can be examined, and places that can be revisited. Investigators also had to reconsider old evidence. Items that once seemed unimportant could become valuable when combined with modern technology. A piece of biological material might have been too small to analyze decades earlier. A record that seemed irrelevant might acquire significance after a new suspect emerged. A statement from an old interview could look different when compared with information discovered years later. This is the strange nature of a cold case. Time destroys evidence, but time can also create opportunities. Technology improves. Databases expand. People who once refused to speak may change their minds. Families may discover information that was hidden for years. Investigators can approach an old crime with methods that did not exist when the original detective walked into the scene. For the families of a Texas killing fields victims, however, the passage of time was never abstract. Every anniversary marked another year without justice. Laura Miller's parents had spent years wondering what happened to their daughter. The families of the unidentified victims had endured an even more painful uncertainty because they did not initially know where their loved ones were or whether they were among the unidentified dead. When Audrey Cook was finally identified, her family received an answer that had been delayed for decades. The same was true for Donna Prudhomme. The news was devastating, but it also ended one form of uncertainty. Their relatives no longer had to wonder whether they might someday return. The investigation then turned toward the harder question of responsibility. Who had encountered these women during their final hours? Who knew their routines? Who had access to vehicles? Who knew the secluded roads? Who might have seen something but never reported it? And perhaps most importantly, who had remained silent? For investigators, one of the most difficult possibilities was that somebody knew more than they had admitted. Cold cases sometimes remain unsolved because evidence is destroyed, but they can also remain unsolved because witnesses are afraid, mistaken, loyal to someone, or simply unwilling to become involved. The Texas killing fields generated many theories about such hidden knowledge. Some suggested that a local offender had exploited the isolated landscape. Others imagined a traveling predator using Interstate 45 as a route between Houston and Galveston. Still others believe that different offenders may have used the same remote area independently. None of these theories could explain everything. That uncertainty kept the case alive. Every answer created another question. Identifying the victims did not identify the killer. Understanding the geography did not establish a motive. Finding patterns did not prove a single offender. Then, after decades of silence, investigators began to focus more intensely on individuals connected to the old evidence. One of the most important developments would come when authorities revisited the case with information that had survived through the years. The investigation was no longer simply about what happened in the fields. It was about what people had known before the bodies were found, what they had said afterward, and whether someone had carried knowledge of the crimes for decades. The Texas killing fields had begun as a mystery hidden beneath an ordinary landscape. Now it was becoming a case about memory, evidence, and the possibility that the truth had been close to investigators all along. And as detectives moved deeper into the histories of the people connected to Calder Road, one question became increasingly urgent. Was there someone who knew exactly what had happened to Laura Miller and the other women, and had spent years keeping that knowledge hidden? The investigation into the Texas killing fields entered a new and difficult era as detectives returned again to evidence that had survived for decades. For years, the case had seemed trapped between uncertainty and memory. The victims were known, but their final moments remained unclear. The landscape had changed, witnesses had aged, and some potential sources of information were no longer alive. Yet modern forensic science offered investigators another something earlier generations had never possessed: the ability to extract new meaning from old evidence. The identification of Audrey Lee Cook and Donna Gonsalon Prudhomme had already demonstrated how dramatically technology could change a cold case. For decades, both women had existed in official records without their true names. Genetic genealogy eventually restored their identities. That achievement did more than give families answers. It gave investigators a starting point from which to reconstruct two lives and examine their final movements. But identifying the victims was only the beginning. Investigators needed to understand how each woman reached the Calder Road area and whether there was a connection between the victims. The questions were deceptively simple. Where had each woman been before she disappeared? Who had spoken with her? Who had offered transportation? Who had seen her after her last confirmed sighting? And could any person appear repeatedly in the background of those separate timelines? During the years when the disappearances occurred, southeastern Texas was changing rapidly. Houston was expanding, suburbs were growing, and industrial development was transforming rural landscapes. Yet pockets of isolation remained. A person could travel only a short distance from a populated neighborhood and suddenly find roads bordered by fields, brush, drainage channels, and undeveloped land. That contrast mattered. A killer did not necessarily need to live beside the fields. Someone familiar with the region could recognize how quickly the environment changed. A driver traveling between Houston and Galveston could also have known where traffic was lighter and where a vehicle could disappear from view. This possibility encouraged investigators to look at transportation patterns. The victims did not necessarily vanish at the same location. Their last known movements occurred in different circumstances. That meant the place where a woman was last seen might not be the place where she died. If a vehicle had been involved, the route between those locations could be more important than the field itself. Unfortunately, much of the evidence from the early investigations was limited by the technology of the time. DNA testing was not yet capable of providing the answers that modern laboratories can sometimes obtain from extremely small biological samples. Databases were smaller or non-existent. Investigators often depended on physical evidence that could be contaminated, degraded, or overlooked. Cold cases can therefore contain a strange combination of enormous information and enormous uncertainty. The files may be thick, but the most important clue may still be missing. As investigators reopened the Texas killing fields cases, they also examined the possibility that more than one offender had used the area. This theory was important because the Calder Road victims were not identical in age, background, or circumstances. Their deaths occurred over several years, and there was no publicly established forensic link proving that one person killed all four. The phrase, Texas killing fields, can create the impression of a single serial killer operating across one territory. The reality is more complicated. The name refers to a broader geographic phenomenon involving numerous disappearances and killings along the I-45 corridor. Some cases may be connected. Others may have entirely separate explanations. That distinction did not make the mystery less frightening. In some ways, it made it more difficult. If one killer were responsible, investigators could search for a consistent signature. If several killers used the same area, the investigation could contain multiple motives, methods, and timelines hidden beneath one notorious name. Among the people examined over the years was Clyde Hedrick. His criminal history and connections to the region made him a person of interest in discussions surrounding the case. Investigators considered whether he possessed information about the women and the area where their remains were found. But suspicion is not proof. For years, no public court proceeding established that Hedrick was responsible for all 4 Calder Road murders. This distinction is essential because cold cases often generate strong theories that become accepted as fact through repetition. A person can be discussed as a suspect for decades without ever being proven responsible for a particular crime. Investigators had to work within a much stricter standard. They needed evidence that connected an individual to a specific victim, a specific act, or a specific piece of evidence. That requirement became especially important as prosecutors began revisiting old cases with modern forensic assistance. The discovery of genetic links in unidentified remains showed that old evidence could still produce new answers. The same principle could potentially apply to other evidence preserved from the original investigations. A sample that could not be tested effectively decades earlier might now yield a usable profile. A relationship that once seemed meaningless could become significant after genealogists constructed a family tree. For the Texas killing fields, every new identification narrowed the unknown. Yet there was another problem: time. The people who knew the victims in the 1980s were now older. Some had forgotten details. Some had moved. Some had died. The younger witnesses who might have noticed a suspicious vehicle or person were now middle-aged or elderly. A memory that might have been clear after a few weeks could become uncertain after 40 years. Even so, investigators continue to appeal for information. A witness does not need to remember everything. Sometimes one small detail can be enough to reopen a line of inquiry. A name remembered from a conversation, a vehicle associated with a particular night, or a person who suddenly behaved differently after a disappearance can become significant when combined with forensic evidence. The families also played an important role in keeping attention on the cases. They refused to allow the passage of time to erase the identities of the women. Laura Miller's name remained associated with the investigation, while the unidentified victims eventually received their identities back. When someone disappears, relatives live with competing possibilities. They may hope the person is alive. They may fear the worst. They may spend years searching for answers, while every unidentified body creates a new nightmare. The identification of Audrey Cook and Donna Prudhomme ended that particular uncertainty, even though it could not undo the violence that had taken their lives. The investigation therefore moved forward on 2 parallel paths. One path sought to understand the victims. The other sought to identify the person or people responsible. As authorities continued examining the history of the Calder Road cases, attention increasingly focused on information that might have been withheld. Investigators began considering whether somebody had known more about the circumstances surrounding the deaths than had ever been revealed. This possibility was especially significant in Laura Miller's case. Her disappearance had occurred in 1984, yet the truth about her fate remained hidden until her remains were discovered almost 2 years later. If someone had witnessed something, transported her, encountered her shortly before her death, or learned about the crime afterward, that person could have been carrying critical information for decades. The same question applied to Audrey Cook. How did she reach the fields? Who last saw her alive? Why was her body left there? Was her death connected to Laura's, or had 2 separate tragedies happened in the same isolated location? Those questions had no simple answers. By the 2020s, investigators were no longer limited to the tools available when the original cases began. Old interviews could be reviewed. DNA could be reconsidered. Genealogical evidence could identify previously unknown relatives. Digital databases could connect information across jurisdictions. Advances in forensic science allowed investigators to approach decades-old evidence with new expectations. The investigation also benefited from renewed public attention. Documentaries, news reports, and renewed appeals encouraged people who had once remained silent to reconsider what they knew. Sometimes a cold case survives because the truth is hidden in an old memory that nobody realizes is important. For decades, the Texas killing fields had seemed like a mystery buried in the soil. Now the investigation was beginning to suggest that the answers might exist in human memories, old statements, and information that had never been fully explained. The fields could not speak. The victims could not tell investigators what happened, but someone else might have known. And after more than 40 years, authorities were finally getting closer to the possibility of identifying that person.